Welcome back, this is Fires bringing you another Skyforge Class guide. When writing my script for this Archer guide, I was a bit surprised by how much information that I wanted to cover, and decided to break this into a series of guides on the Archer instead of one gigantic class guide. So, this first video will be a basic overview of the Archer class, followed by the arrow skills and talents that affect them. The guides that follow will cover the remaining skills, gear choices, talent and symbol builds, attack rotations, and finally a basic outline of the PvP Archer. The Archer is a damage dealing class that also offers some amount of crowd control abilities. I consider the Archer a Tier 2 class, Tier 2 as in how easy or hard a class is to unlock, not Tier 2 in any sort of power ranking. You could unlock the Archer, Necromancer, Kinetic, or Slayer with about the same amount of effort due to their distance from the starting trio of classes. Depending on which abilities, talents, and symbols you select, the Archer can be used effectively in PvP or PvE, but will struggle if you attempt to use one spec for the other application. The focus of the majority of this guide is on the PvE Archer. At the time of the filming of this guide, the PvE Archer is currently on the low to medium portion of the damage dealing spectrum, but that could always change as the game is patched and adjusted. Archers provide ranged constant damage with irregularly spaced spikes due to the reliance on damage over time abilities coupled with a dot cancelling ability that does a large portion of the overall damage in the skill rotation. Another benefit of the Archer is that they remain very mobile while providing this damage. A major drawback of this class is its clicky intensive nature. You will be clicking pretty much non-stop, and it can become very tiring to play for an extended period. Think back to the button mashers of the NES era. I'm talking like Konami's track and field levels of hand cramping. This is what the female Archer's class costume looks like, and this is the Archer Mastery costume. Overall, they did a pretty good job. It's fun, but not too slutty. Like most damage classes, the Archer's damage output is limited by an energy bar shown here. The Archer class calls this resource Concentration. Concentration is generated steadily over time, and also by using any of the sharpened arrow attacks. It's depleted by swapping arrow families, and by using some of the other non-arrow abilities. But the actual activation of the arrow skills do not consume the concentration. You basically pre-purchase the cost of the electric and fire arrow skills when you switch to their respective arrow family. The Archer's abilities can be grouped into 6 basic sets: arrow skills, rapid fire skills, trip skills, gas skills, jump skills, and the electric barrier. This first guide will focus only on the arrow skills. All of these skills are tied to a combination system of left and right clicks. The right mouse click cycles you through the different arrow families. The starting default arrow family is always sharpened arrows. One right click will get you to the electric family, and the next right click will get you to the fire family. If you click one more time, you'll end up back at sharpened arrows. It costs 100 concentration to swap out of the default sharpened arrow family, but the swap between electric and fire is free. If you're in combat and swap all the way around from fire to sharpened arrows again, it refunds the amount of concentration you initially put into the family swaps. This refund will not occur when out of combat, so plan ahead for the next shot and swap families with a purpose. I think this is one place this class can be improved, by the way. It isn't until you almost finish the whole Archer Atlas that you can grab the loading mechanism talent that reduces the swap cost by 20 concentration. This makes electric and fire shots cost 80 concentration instead of 100, which doesn't sound like much, but playing the Archer before and after that talent access is night and day. I would either like to see them lower the swap cost, or put that talent closer to the middle of the atlas. The default arrow family is sharpened arrows. After any attack, you default back to sharpened arrows. Also note that if you swap into one of the other families, you have about 5 to 6 seconds to use an arrow skill or swap again before your bow will reset automatically back to sharpened arrows. If you left click, you fire off your basic ranged attack called single shot. Each arrow does about 28% of your base damage. This is your spammable attack as it's always ready and can be fired one after the other. This attack will build concentration when used. A large chunk of your overall damage will be done by single shots. If you hold down the left click while using sharpened arrows, you'll see a meter fill up above your health bar. Once this bar fills into the second portion of this bar, you can release the click and fire a piercing shot. This attack does about 50% of your base damage, and as you can guess by the name, it can hit multiple targets that are lined up with your target. Using this attack will also generate concentration. By itself, this attack does pretty decent damage, but where it really shines is with the Easy Target talent. Easy Target will make your piercing shot remove a fire dot on a target and do 6 times as much damage as a normal piercing shot. which works out to be about 3 times base damage. Once this ability is activated on a target, it puts this debuff on the target, showing that Easy Target was activated, and it won't activate on that target again for 10 seconds. It also won't cancel any fire dots if you hit them with another piercing shot until it falls off. It is imperative to pay attention to this debuff for good damage output. A very important note here about Easy Target. The cooldown is applied to the individual targets that the piercing shot cleared the fire dots on, not a cooldown on the ability or the archer itself. What I mean by this is, you can proc Easy Target on multiple enemies one after the other, and since Piercing Shot carries through targets, it can proc multiple Easy Target effects with the same piercing shot. A second important note here is that your target doesn't have to be burning for 10 seconds before you can activate this talent. Start every round off with either a burning arrow for single targets or a wildfire arrow for multiple targets, and then follow it up with a piercing shot, followed by reapplying the fire dot now that the cooldown debuff is on the target. The third charge level of a sharpened arrow attack is called both Rain of Arrows and Arrow Storm, depending on different tooltips. This is an area of effect attack that rains down arrows in an area around the target, doing around 50% base damage to every enemy. Like the other 2 levels of sharpened arrows, this also restores concentration. This can be modified by the concentration talent that increases the amount of concentration regained by 10 for each additional target hit by Arrow Storm, up to 50 points. I personally only used this skill when I didn't have access to both of the other arrow family's third charge abilities. The way the skill selection works, you can only choose 2 of the 3 arrow family finishers, but this one lacks the endgame utility that the other 2 provide. But perhaps it might be useful for newer players that don't have full access to all the talents and need help generating concentration. With a single right click, you are now in the electric arrow family, which is shown by the effect around your bow, and the talent icons are changed on your hotbar. The basic left-click arrow attack is Electric Shock. It does no initial damage, but instead puts a damage over time effect on the target that does electrical damage over 6 seconds equal to your base damage. This effect snares the target, and it will lash out and shock up to 3 other targets around it for periodic damage as well. The snare on this arrow effect allows the archer to kite effectively, backpedaling while continuing to shoot the slowed target. This attack can be modified a few ways via talents. Elemental Fusion makes Electric Shock do 150% more damage to targets with a burning dot on them already. Superconductivity snares the target 20% more and makes the effect last 4 seconds longer. Both of these are suitable for our PvE build. With the Voltage Arc talent selected, a target with an Electric Shot dot up will stun up to 2 nearby targets if hit with a named shot. This is more of a PvP effect, so skip it for our build. Holding down an Electric Shock past the first bar will fire a piercing discharge when you let it go. It will fire an electrical charged piercing arrow that will hit any targets in its path, plus a bit on either side of the arrow. All hit targets will take 1.2 times base damage and be stunned for 2 seconds. This is a great arrow to use when soloing after you have your targets loaded up on dots. It's also helpful to use if your group's tank is having a hard time staying alive. The supercharged Verds in Hepsilon Temple, for example, can be stunned by this arrow, possibly saving your tank a ton of hurt. This skill can be modified by Electric Burns, that increases damage done by all sources on targets you have stunned. Electric Disruption will make this shot do 500% damage to shields, and Ionization will increase the damage done by piercing discharge by 52%. Honestly, in a PvE environment, Electric Burns may help you burn down large packs of swarm enemies quicker by increasing raid damage overall by 20% while stunned, but you wouldn't be using piercing discharge to get that stun effect on the pack anyway. You'd probably use the next skill, EMP, and the other 2 talents are more PvP centered anyway, so I wouldn't suggest grabbing them for the PvE build. The third charge level of an electric arrow attack is Electromagnetic Pulse. It basically sets off an EMP bomb on your target, doing base damage to surrounding targets and stunning them all for 2.5 seconds. Again, like piercing discharge before, this can be helpful if you're assisting a weak tank, or by buying time kiting a pack of burning mobs. But outside of that, this attack really isn't that useful in PvE. In small-scale PvP, this takes way too long to channel to be of use, but it shines in large-scale PvP where you can stun large packs of enemies before you're noticed. Electric Burns, Ionization, and Electric Disruption talents apply to EMP the same way they work for piercing discharge. Finally, the third arrow family is the Fire Arrows. This is where most of the big damage abilities are found. To get here, you need to right-click twice from Sharpened Arrows. The base Fire Arrow ability is activated with a simple left click. This will shoot a fiery arrow. This puts a damage over time effect on the target for 12 seconds, doing 4.15 times base damage over that period. This is one of your bread and butter abilities, and you should have as many targets burning as possible at all times. Fiery Arrow is the best way to get single targets burning, as it's quicker to apply than Wildfire Arrow. As with all damage over time abilities, all ticks of damage can trigger a critical hit. Fiery Arrow can be modified by Biting Flame. This talent causes the burn damage from Fiery Arrow and Wildfire Arrows to do 52% more damage to targets above half health. It also increases the damage from all Sharpened Arrow family attacks and both types of rapid fire by 62% while the target is burning. And remember, the Easy Target skill will strip your burn effect off the target when hit by a piercing arrow for huge damage. And remember to reapply the fire dot as soon as possible. Here's another learning moment when talking about the burning talents. Early in the Archer Atlas, we get access to Pyrophobia. Pyrophobia is a wonderful solo talent, but Pyrophobia is a horrible group ability. It'll make mobs run everywhere and your tank will hate you. You have been warned. Holding down a fiery arrow past the first marker, then releasing, will fire an aimed shot. Aimed shots will do about 3 times base damage to the target. Aimed shot can be modified by a few different things. The Jungle Law talent does 60% bonus damage on aimed shots when the target is above half health. Perfect Aim doubles the damage of aimed shots if you're out of combat when shooting it. This is a great talent for solo work if you use it in conjunction with a bow with a percent bonus damage to your first aimed shot. You can sometimes one-shot mid-sized mobs. Finally, Voltage Arc, as mentioned above, will stun 2 nearby enemies if you land an aimed shot on a target that has the electrical shot debuff active. I tend to pick up Jungle Law always, Perfect Aim sometimes, but Voltage Arc is more of a PvP talent. The third stage Fire Arrow skill is Wildfire Arrow. This is an AoE skill that will hit your target and all other targets within 12 yards for 30% base damage. That also puts the burning effect on all targets hit, doing another 4 times base damage over 12 seconds. This is a slightly weaker version of the burn from the Fiery Arrow, but the initial damage and multiple targets make this a huge damage skill in situation with lots of enemies. This burning effect can trigger Pyrophobia and can be cleared with a piercing shot for huge damage if you have Easy Target. Quick note here. In large packs, a Wildfire Arrow followed by a piercing shot into the middle of the pack will do a ton of damage. Remember to reapply the Wildfire Arrow and then try to tab through the pack looking for targets that didn't proc the Easy Target and pop them while the rest of the pack burns. This burning dot also counts for the Elemental Fusion requirement, as well as the Biting Flame talents mentioned before in the Fiery Arrow section. Well, this brings part 1 to a close. We've gone over Archer basics, we've taken a look at the costumes, and we took a really in-depth look at all the main arrow attack skills and the talents attached to them. Part 2 of this guide will cover the remaining skills and talents. If you'd like to see more Skyforge guides, click on the video on the left, or click on the Archer icon on the right to subscribe to my channel. As always, I hope you were entertained and learned something from this guide. Please leave any comments and suggestions below, and until next time, happy hunting.